Hello, this is Sherline of Kathanika. The story I have for you today is a folktale from Manipur. It is called The Golden Deer and the Golden Parrot. This story is brought to you as part of the Utsar 2020 festival organized by the Jaya Hai Museum of the Mumbai International Airport. The grandmothers in Manipur tell many tales. These tales are told not only to entertain, but also to teach the listeners codes of conduct and behavior in society. The tale we are about to hear is one such. In the present-day Manipur, there once existed a kingdom. The king of that kingdom had only one son, whom he loved dearly. The little prince had a play companion, the son of the prime minister. The minister's boy was the same age as the prince, and the two boys got along very well. The prince and the prime minister's son were good friends. The king treated the minister's son as good as his own, and both the boys lived together in the palace. The prince and the prime minister's son shared a strong friendship. They were devoted to each other. Both the boys had the best of teachers to tutor and train them in the various arts, crafts, and other subjects required to rule the kingdom. As time passed by, both the boys grew up to be capable young men. Soon the time arrived for the boys to get married. A princess and a lovely young girl were found for the young men, and the weddings were celebrated with great pomp and grandeur. One day, the king had a visitor, a traveler from abroad. The traveler, an old man, was received with great respect and offered food and a place to rest. The traveler visited the court every day and told the king and his people stories of the places he had been to, the wonders he had seen, and the food he had tasted. As the traveler was telling the tales, the prince and the minister's son heard with rapt attention. They were fascinated by the tales of the traveler. After staying for a few weeks at the palace, the traveler went on his way to continue his travels. The traveler and his tales had made an impression on the prince and the minister's son. Long after the traveler had left the kingdom, the two men discussed and wondered about the tales they had heard. One afternoon, the prince and the minister's son were thus engaged when the prince said, "I think I would like to travel outside of the kingdom and learn about all the other lands beyond. I would like to receive an education at the hands of the wizards the traveler mentioned. Come, friend, let us travel out of the kingdom and see what lies beyond. Let us see if we can further our education, which will enable us to work towards the betterment of our people." The minister's son, who was as eager, immediately agreed. The suggestion was put forth in front of the king and the prime minister. Both the king and the prime minister thought this an excellent plan. Preparations began to be made in earnest. Various things that the men would require were collected, bags were packed, and on an auspicious day, the prince and the prime minister's son mounted their horses and set off to see the world. The prince and the prime minister's son rode their horses out of the palace, out of the city, and out of the kingdom. Soon they entered the forest. The forest was busy with the birds, animals, and insects going about their daily life, taking only a brief pause to examine the intruders into their space. After riding for a while, the men came to a place where the roads split into two paths. There was a huge banyan tree right in the center where the paths split. The weary travelers got off the horses to contemplate the further course of action. Both men had a good meal beneath the tree and after tidying up got ready to move forward. The prince and the minister's son looked at each other. Which path should they take? The prince came up with a plan. Brother, we want to see what lies beyond our kingdom. If we both take the same route, we will never know what lies on the other side. Therefore, I suggest we each take a different route and explore the area. We will meet here after 1 year and we can tell each other what we found out. The Prime Minister's son thought this was a good plan, and so the prince took the road to the right and the Prime Minister's son the road to the left. We will meet here at the same point after 1 complete year of our education, said the prince, and both the men departed from there. After a year had passed, the prince found himself at the same banyan tree in the forest. The prince was in a good mood, happy to be heading home after a long time. He was looking forward to seeing his family. The prince had had a good journey. He had travelled far and had fortunately met good people who had helped, guided, and been generous to him. The prince got off his horse, sat down in the shade of the banyan tree, and waited. He was eager to see his friend, the minister's son. I hope he has had as good an experience, thought the prince. The prince did not have to wait long. No sooner had the prince settled down to rest than he heard the sound of a horse galloping. The prince jumped to his feet, hand on his sword, ready to pull it out if need be. But there was no need, for out of the thick jungle came the dark horse that belonged to his friend, and on it was the minister's son. The minister's son was overjoyed to see the prince. He gave a joyous call and jumped off the horse. The prince and the minister's son embraced each other, each happy to see the other alive and well. Both men settled down under the banyan tree to rest and exchange news. After sufficient rest, the prince and the minister's son decided to get on their way, as they still had a long way to go before they could reach the palace. As they stood up, dusted their clothes, and got ready to get onto their horses, the minister's son said, "Friend, we each have met marvelous wizards who taught us their secrets. Let us show each other what we have learned." The prince, who was excited to display his skills, readily agreed. The minister's son requested to display his magical powers first. The prince nodded an approval. The minister's son lay down on the ground. He put up his hands, open palms towards his face, chanted something on his palms, and rubbed them on his face. Immediately the minister's son went into a trance. His eyes froze, his mouth fell open, and out of his mouth jumped a golden deer amidst a shower of golden sparks. The golden deer pranced about playing for some time, then made its way to the lifeless man, into the mouth from where it had come. The prince clapped his hands, impressed. As soon as the minister's son finished showing his magical power, the prince started showing his own talent. The prince lay down on the ground and in a manner similar to the minister's son chanted on his open palms and rubbed his face. Just like the minister's son before, the prince went into a trance. His eyes froze, his mouth fell open, and out of the prince's mouth flew a beautiful golden parrot amidst a dazzle of golden sparks. The golden parrot flew around a bit and settled onto a branch of the banyan tree. The parrot began surveying the surroundings. At this time, the greedy son of the minister thought, "If I transform myself into the golden deer and get inside the body of the prince, I can become the prince himself. And later on, when the present king dies, I will become the king and I can live happily ever after." Having this thought on his mind, the prince's son lay down and changed himself into a golden deer. As the golden deer, he immediately disappeared inside the prince's mouth. The minister's son then got up as the prince. The minister's son, who now occupied the body of the prince, looked down at his former body. The golden parrot saw all that was happening and began grinding his beak and cackling in alarm. The birds on the trees began cackling too. The minister's son in the body of the prince paid no heed to the change of atmosphere. The minister's son in the body of the prince gathered dry branches, piled them over his former body, and set it on fire. He gave a wicked smile as he watched the body burn. The golden parrot watched the greedy minister's son's activity and thought, "My friend, you who are called brother has betrayed me. You set your own body on fire because you are jealous of me. Dismay! I have to spend the rest of my life as a wild bird." With tears streaming down his face and a wounded heart, the parrot flew off into the empty sky. The Prime Minister's son then stripped off his horse of all the goods. He put all his personal belongings in a box and threw it down a deep well. Then the minister's son, in the body of the prince, mounted the prince's horse and returned to the palace. When the minister's son returned to the palace pretending as the prince, he was received with a warm welcome. The king and queen were very happy to see their son back home. The prime minister, who was eager about the whereabouts of his own son, asked the prince, "Where is your best friend?" To this, the cold-hearted minister's son pretended to be concerned and sad and answered in the prince's quivering voice, "Uncle, in the forest we took different routes and decided to meet after a year. Today I waited for a long time at the place in the forest, but your son did not come." Thus, the minister's son began living as the prince. Years passed, and after the death of the old king, the minister's son became king of the palace and lived happily. Meanwhile, the real prince who had transformed to a golden parrot kept wandering from place to place until one day he flew inside a palace of a neighboring kingdom. The golden parrot came to the chamber of the princess. The princess was busy weaving cloth on her loom. The golden parrot flew into the room and perched itself on the loom. The princess marveled at the parrot and began talking to it. She was mesmerized by its beauty and fell in love with it. The parrot came every day to visit the princess. One day, the princess said, "Hey parrot, I am in love with you. Come and stand at my loom. I'll catch and keep you in a golden cage and own you as mine." The golden parrot replied to this, "Dear princess, if you want to own me, you must promise me that you will not sell me off or give me away." The princess promised him, and the parrot flew and stood at her loom. The princess caught the parrot and put him inside a golden cage. The golden parrot and the golden cage were quite an attraction. People thronged the palace just to look at the gorgeous golden parrot. Word spread far and wide about the marvelous parrot. The minister's son also heard about this news. The minister's son was furious. He knew that this marvelous golden parrot could be no other than the real prince who had turned into a golden parrot. The minister's son was not at all pleased by the news and began thinking how to get rid of the enemy. The minister's son, who was not the king, wrote a letter to the king of the kingdom where the parrot was living. "I wish to buy the parrot. How much will you sell him for?" The king informed his daughter, the princess, about the offer. The princess was furious. She penned a curt reply stating that the parrot wasn't up for sale. The minister's son was angry with the reply. He wrote another letter. "If you refuse to give the golden parrot to me, then be prepared for war." The king of the neighboring kingdom, that is the father of the princess, who was taking care of the parrot, was very old to fight against anyone. The princess knew that if a war happened, her father, who was quite weak in health, was sure to die. In order to save her father's life, the princess broke the promise made to the golden parrot. She begged the golden parrot to forgive her, and with a sad heart gave it away to the minister's son, the pretend king, who had himself gone to fetch the parrot. The minister's son carefully brought the parrot to his palace, and he decided to kill it in front of all the people as a grand event, claiming that the golden parrot was an evil one. A huge crowd gathered in the compound to witness this unusual event. The parrot was taken out for a stroll around the palace by the king in a procession. After the stroll, the parrot was to be slaughtered to death. The golden parrot, who was kept on display on a special podium, began to weep. The queen, the wife of the minister's son, who was once the prince's wife, also started crying. Looking at the queen, the golden parrot began to sing to her. "Dear queen, I am the real prince, your dear husband." The parrot then went on to narrate the entire sequence of incidents that had happened. "And so you see, O queen, he is not the real prince." The queen and the parrot discussed what they were supposed to do in front of the people. When the king returned to the palace after his stroll, the queen, as discussed earlier with the parrot in front of the many people, looked at the king and said, "Dear mighty king, you had gone outside to study magical power for 1 complete year. What did you learn? Please show us today. What have you learned in front of all the people gathered here?" The king resisted for long, but finally he had to show. In front of the huge crowd, a clean sheet of cloth was laid on the floor. The king lay down on top of the sheet, chanted something on his palms, and rubbed them on his face. Then a beautiful golden deer jumped out of the king's mouth and played on the ground. Looking at this wonderful trick of the king, the people applauded and praised him. Meanwhile, as discussed earlier, the queen opened the golden cage and out flew the golden parrot. The parrot went into the body of the king, which was lying on the ground. When the golden deer tried to get inside the body of the king, he found that the body was alive, and alas, he could not enter. And so the golden deer ran into the jungle. The real son of the king told the truth to all the people gathered there, and he lived as king of the palace with his queen happily ever after. I hope you liked the story. If you did, don't forget to subscribe and share the story with your friends. Bye-bye.